I think the point is, after we lose a critical mass, if it's just
Yeah, if it's just me
Michelle
and
and me, then
me.
yeah.
Well, I'd be happy to discuss with you too. That's not, I mean, if the recording is there, we can always edit, right? We can just put thoughts down.
Yeah. Although
Especially for
I
this
do
part
think,
here, where
yeah,
Okay,
2 hours is probably going to be much. Let's try to get through the next hour, and we'll see where we're at.
okay, so I think I'm not sure what this means, but we can return to it individually later.
What means, sorry?
Flexibility of shared functionality. But anyway, we can return to them when we get to them. But so
I think I can. Yeah.
Use of attributes versus top level variables. That would probably be a coding style thing. Use of classes, methods, and functions rather than code blocks. I'm going to move you down a little bit, Michelle, and indent you.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm going to say what goes into the interview. That's a little prescriptive what you've written, but so
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fine.
So I think those just make it the problem we're identifying.
Sure.
Here.
I'm just, yep, I'm open to revision.
No, I think this is a good illustration of the broader question, which is like what should be in there.
Yeah.
And then I think another point would be like, I'm calling these name blocks, like when, okay, what can be set in the interview order block directly? When name blocks. Thing. When do you
Ooh, yeah, really good questions.
implicit triggering to be defined? I would say probably we should do probably most of the time.
Yep.
And then another person who I think we could bring into this conversation, like this is kind of what Matt Newstead's project at Aleo is, like what they got a TIG grant for.
What was their project exactly?
I mean, they're building some forms for Lark, New Hampshire, and also for Aleo to use themselves. But their goal is, I think the way they phrase their project is to develop standards. And this seems like the kind of information that would be really useful, because I don't think anyone's done this for DocAssemble project yet that I know of. There might be some internal teams. I feel like a lot of people are using DocAssemble internally at firms that might be big, and they might be, oh, okay, hold on a second. I might need to step out for a minute to help our plumbers here.
So do we want to start kind of decide, are we just going to go down the list, or do we want to give these priorities and work on our top priorities?
I like that idea, yeah. Have we finished the ideation stage here?
I just realized, Quentin, you and I are both
away.
the same login, so I'm going to change my login.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
We were both signed in as the lab.
This link with that. That's the problem. Let me just check. I'm going to walk away for just a couple minutes, and I'll be back. Okay. But you can keep brainstorming for sure.
Yep.
Great.
All right. So how do we feel about the ideation phase? Do we think we want to do more stuff, or do we want to just dive in and try to flesh some of these out?
I think those are the things I wrote down. So like, yeah.
Oh, I do have another point. I don't know where it belongs to. You know, when people create a file and later on wanted to abandon it, this file, it's so difficult to completely delete it if you have a group of people working on it. So maybe there should be some kind of guidelines to say how to get rid of an unused file.
Oh, I think that will be, I think I'm going to make a section here for like tutorials that need to be written, and it doesn't need to stay here. It just so we write them down.
Okay.
Tutorials that need to be created to move later. Deleting a zombie file, creating start by creating a project. What was another one Maeve said earlier? I don't remember.
I don't think
There's been a lot of it. Everybody's been multitasking.
GitHub stuff.
I only single task.
Were you thinking explicitly about like sort of GitHub issues?
Was it GitHub?
I feel like there was some discussion of.
I don't know. I don't remember using GitHub from the start. So I think if we can, I'm going to quickly add to the start, like how quick it is, Q if it's quick, and high priority, H if it's high priority, right? So just to kind of give us a, you know what, I'll just do quick. High priority. I think people feel about file names and variable names that they're high priority, right?
Yeah, I think that's something that it's hard to unpack. If it's hard to wind back if we go down a road without them.
So order blocks inside a YAML file, slow, medium priority maybe.
Yeah, why don't we we'll pass through, and then I'm sure things will change in relative weight.
Yeah.
How many files?
So they'll be like, oh yeah, that's the top priority because it's the only one I've been thinking about. Oh, now I thought about these other things. That's clearly down.
Okay. Functionality should be in Python module slow. Very slow. Medium. I guess I'm saying medium.
What was who wrote this one? What was the question?
I wrote that down, I think.
What were you thinking when you were thinking about what functionality?
I guess it's like we have a lot of ways to do code, right? Mm-hmm. You can write a Python module and have the code happen there. You can use a code block.
Okay, I got you.
You can have some little code snippets that are executed right in the template. Yeah.
So the question is sort of what tasks should we package off into a module and then use that? Is that the general idea?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Then how are we going to get people to use the toolbox? And then the sample interviews.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very similar question to, I'm going to put flexibility near it because I think they're very related. Oh, that's not what I meant. There we go.
Okay, well, that makes more sense.
I don't know.
I'm not sure if I understood it before, but the specifics help.
Some of these I do feel like they're high, but like.
Do you literally mean generic object?
Yes, and things like it. Yeah.
Why the heck is Git using 99% of my CPU?
Git
Hold on a
is?
second. Yeah, I don't understand.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got my computer's being a little weird. I'm trying to clean some stuff up.
Yeah. When I wrote it, I also meant allow content customization, but I then broke it out into both of those, so into individual things. So
We
yes,
put that as on top level.
we can replace when to generalize with the more specific text you wrote. I had just, no, this is still about flexibility of shared functionality. It's the same category. I can show you later, but
I don't see how the first two examples are related, but maybe they might be worth still talking about.
yes. Okay, yeah, but we'll talk more about
Okay.
that later.
Some of these sound like new features we're talking about rather than coding questions too, which is okay. But these are the pain points we're trying to address here.
Yeah, well, as we look at whether we're like what new basic questions or et cetera we add, like it does look to the future as well. I think like currently working on a thing for shared functionality, and it's also like toolbox stuff.
The sample interviews actually show people a lot of things that they can actually follow easily instead of asking question, wait for answer, asking for question, wait for answer.
What is this?
Sample interviews.
Sample.
So like a precedent.
Tutorials.
It's that project that tells you how to use the toolbox, but also it explains some other
Yep.
ways to do things, or I don't know.
Yeah, sample interviews specific to the kind of stuff we're doing, very, very much so. I don't know, some of this I feel like we've been surviving without it, so it's all medium priority. So it's just a matter of like,
I think something I've been struggling with if I'm changing someone else's code is maybe not even written down here yet. Jonathan added, by the way, I don't know if anyone else has seen this yet. There's a new feature, the playground.
Okay.
Oh, I was already there, so I just got the playground. This little icon there.
Oh, what does that do?
Lets you see where variables are used.
Oh, that's freaking awesome.
Cool.
This is the thing we were talking about. I was like, this is going to be a hard feature to do. Jonathan did it that night, so.
And it's not, but it doesn't follow them through, like it's because he's got the intrinsic name stuff going already, so that lets him do that. You won't be able to do this in your editor because they don't do intrinsic name stuff, but I don't think it'd be able to handle values as they're passed around to different variable names, for example.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was heading. So it's like, that is a coding style thing I do think we should talk about. Is like when.
Oh, nice. Yes.
When do you abstract? I guess the question is, how many intermediate steps should we take? This is actually related to.
So one of the things that's starting to strike me about this conversation is that the answers to some of these questions maybe depend upon who we expect is doing what work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to flag that, like, because as we've talked about, like we have these people at different levels of sophistication or at different spots in their journey, and what would make sense for one group is not going to make sense for the other. So I just want to flag that.
No, actually, I think that does actually make sense. It would help to look at the outline of an initial coder who needs to, like that checklist.
Yes, that
And
you
then
drew
we
up.
can say different categories. So
Yeah.
the questions here or the principles here can be categorized in that kind of mindset.
I think creating sections based on that is really a great idea, that it's like, this is the section when you're just starting out, like, and that's the how we were talking about earlier, what is this document for?
Yeah.
It can be broken out into sections that are readable for different levels, right?
Yeah, I guess, and the only thing I want to keep in mind there is that we may have different levels of people doing different tasks more frequent. You know, it's like if
Yeah.
something that would make sense in one context might not make sense for that user. I'm trying to think of an example, like the question of whether to use like a pre-existing feature or to code something your own. That sentence got away from me. Never mind.
Yeah, there's a question here about when to customize, if that's the.
Yeah, I was trying to
only
think
word.
of a specific example where I could
Okay.
think of something where like it would be like, because we've decided that new folks are going to do this set of things, in that context, we should use these guidelines. But
like
we
when
know that
should-
over here, only experts are going to do it. So we don't need to worry about those, keeping it accessible in that way.
Right. So maybe it's like, there might be a section for new coders on when to customize and a section for more advanced coders on when to customize.
Well, maybe, but I didn't want to get that. I was hoping that so the scenario I'm thinking is that there might be some part in the assembly line, right? Where like, it's going to be law students that are always going to sit in that spot. And so the stylistic guides we want to give them is to do stuff there that's going to be easy for them. But in another spot, it's going to only be expert people who sit there. So it can be a different set of style guidelines based upon the context of the spot and the workflow they are, not just that like different people could do this same thing differently. It's that there's a set of things we do here.
Yeah.
So maybe we can do 2 levels. So
Well,
I think we'll
I'm
figure
trying
out the levels
yeah.
later once we start outlining and this.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid writing 2 levels for the same job, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that there might be some jobs that we want to write it at a certain level because that's the level we want for that job, but we don't want to take that same thing and write it 2 different ways.
Okay. I just
So for example, like variable names, I think variable names is a good example. Variable names, we want to make them accessible and understandable to a new team member because that's where they're going to get their teeth wet. And so we should just keep that in mind when we're writing those guidelines, as opposed to leaning upon conventions that we might know from other implementations and such, that some more experienced people would already be able to reference.
Okay.
But also I think one thing that applies to whatever level is that we don't want the name to be too long.
So let's talk about names first. So let's make that our first topic, right? Because I think we keep coming back to that, and I think that's a good.
Always talked about.
So
we probably can reach consensus on them too. Yeah.
I'm making a section. I don't know if we want a section for each of these, but I don't think we can fit it all into that outline.
No, I think sections are great. Yeah, the outline was more just for us to capture everything, and now I think you're right. Now we break down into the heading level.
Sure.
So I'm going to also link to what we already have, which I don't think we should neglect.
Yeah, we have some of it written out.
Some of it clearly confused people because they didn't do things the way that I interpreted it, meant it to mean when I wrote it. So
my favorite was when I was talking to Michelle and she's like, I wrote that.
Yeah.
Michelle,
like, we have a thing.
We both did.
I'm like, we have a thing. And then she's like, oh, I wrote a thing. And I was like, oh.
Yes.
Well, like we have a bunch of names that have Hungarian notation, which isn't what I intended at all for like yes, no.
Hungarian notation. are we, which one, is that snake case?
No, Hungarian is where you say like the variable type in the name of the variable
Oh,
itself.
I see.
We have
Yeah, I was just copying from that's not generally I think that was only for the PDF. That wasn't for variable names for code, that was variable names for PDF, because that is how the field was like differentiated. That's how one field was differentiated from another field. So there was a parent, so is this person the parent? Checkbox yes, checkbox no, right?
That makes sense. Yeah. So the people have used it where there's only one checkbox, which is confusing because there's no that pair.
Yeah, but explaining that to like, at least at that time, there wasn't really time to sit down and be like, and in this case, you shouldn't use the, yes, no ending.
I'm
So-
not trying to go backwards. I'm just saying like this isn't
Yeah.
necessarily helping people the way that I was hoping yet, because that's where people didn't understand the intention.
Yeah. I don't think it was harmful, or at least I didn't find it harmful.
Yeah, I don't think we want to be prospective, not retrospective.
But even prospectively, I don't know that this is a place where I would want to focus on changing, because I didn't find it harmful. So if there was something that I was examining, that wouldn't be a particular priority for me. But if other people feel differently, that's okay.
I mean, my point isn't to revisit, it's just to say, what should we go in? I think this is an example where people interpreted it differently to the intention of it was written. So it's a way to think about how can we write it more clearly.
Okay.
If the answer is, well, maybe people just didn't want to do what we'd written, then that's a different question. So it sounds like maybe we don't agree on necessarily whether you should put yes or no into the end of the variable name, but we don't have to really reach that. I think we probably can do some more high level things about it first.
I think also there's a differentiation between like code variable names and like PDF variable names.
That's true.
That's true. For folks who have been working with the especially people when they were being onboarded and going through this, what problems are we trying to solve by revisiting? So Michelle, you said there's a lot of stuff here that didn't cause issues. What were the issues that you did see coming up?
With variable names, honestly, most of the ones that I saw were, I mean, there were some that didn't follow snake case, or like didn't follow like the like formatting conventions. But mostly it was just lack of experience in creating clear variable names, right?
Okay, so
it would just be like, they would just be like date as opposed to like date of service or service date. Not all caps for constants?
There are no constants in our project. It's not a convention that I've seen in Python.
Oh, really?
We don't have any constants, so I think it might be more confusing.
I don't mean constants as in the object is frozen. I mean constants as in a user should not be changing this, not a user, a coder should not be mutating or changing the value of this variable name. So it's more of a communication than a...
We don't have any examples of that in our project. Not that we don't have the concept of things that someone shouldn't change. We don't have any examples of variable names that follow that convention.
Okay, but I've seen the possibility.
There are some conventions around using underscores for similar things, but anyway.
Underscores for constants?
For private variables, it's not exactly the same concept as a constant.
No, yeah, I think we use private variables much less. Like, I don't see that as a...
I don't think we have to discuss constants because we don't have any in our project, that's all. So
sounds good.
Instead of deleting it, I crossed it out because I think we can leave it
well.
Yep.
So then if I could summarize the issue with the way people were writing things was that it made it difficult then for someone else to pick up and run with it because they didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't know what the variable was referencing. Is that fair as the main issue?
Yeah, I would say, so,
Oh, nice
sorry, I
doing
was
the
getting
capital case. I was laughing at that, sorry.
Yeah. Some people like, I prefer to use less, I prefer you use more commonly known words when it's possible. So yes, it was a lot of inexperience in being specific. So slash specificity. And that was like the biggest thing I saw. It was just like, it's too general, or it doesn't actually like, for example, this is actually one that can be named, which is for a, Boolean value, use a form of to be, or a word, use a word or phrase that has the answer yes or no. Like, that is something that I think would help guide people in that kind of situation. It's still not always successful. I don't know if it's just because there's too much going on for them to think about the fact that it should be a yes or no. I think they also didn't have a great understanding of what Boolean values were, that like true and false were a like thing. But
you're thinking like, so just do it for instance.
Has children.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely I've seen that issue with my students when doing data preparation, and you have to turn things into zeros and ones, and it's hard for them to name columns in a way that the answer is yes or no. Yeah, so yeah. I see what you mean.
I would just add it, like, I think it's usually like a verb noun pair.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I think you're right that sticking with things like to be or possession are probably the first.
All right.
Yeah, I think the thing with the yes or no is tough, because I tend to think things are yes or no that I don't think normal people would think are yes, no. Like if I was making dummy variables in a data analysis and it came from a bunch of notes, and it was like the social media platform, I have to turn like something that was a note and someone could write Facebook or Twitter or whatnot. I'd turn each of those into individual columns, and it would be Twitter, yes or no, Facebook, yes or no, which makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean, I might say from Twitter or from Facebook.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that,
or is from
right,
Twitter, is from Facebook.
Yeah,
I think the point
is from Twitter as opposed to from what?
That's really an example of a checkbox. So, and maybe your data structure didn't give you the flexibility to say these are all grouped variables. So it's like, those are options that all are related. So social media, option, Twitter, yes, no.
Yeah, no, I was just using an example of creating dummy variables from a set. The point is, I think Michelle got to the point that I was thinking, which is that it's I tend to, as a shorthand, exclude the use of the from, right,
or
whatever
from.
that context is.
Yeah.
So figuring out some way to help people do that. Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
People
No
who have
Hungarian notation. I'm gonna put here Hungarian.
word you didn't know before, Michelle. It's a really
I didn't know what Hungarian notation was.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, I've heard it before, but I forgot it. Hungarian notation when, but yeah, like when specified. When this is for PDFs, when it's the only differentiating feature of a field.
Yeah, we do have that exception for PDFs, you're right.
only when
Really the special exception of a date. I think that usually is helpful to include the word date in a date variable. I think, and there's plenty of essays that talk about whether it's good or bad to use Hungarian notation. I mean, one is it's confusing. It makes variable names longer without adding more information in most cases. And the second reason is if you're using object-oriented programming, it actively interferes with the flexibility that gives you.
Yeah, I like, it is not as simple a conversation as we're making it here. There are people who very strongly believe that the type of the variable should be named because it takes less examination later when someone new is looking at the code. So that also.
They are in the minority. So I think it's a good habit to not encourage people to adopt. Using
Also, I think
is out of fashion.
Yes. Also, I think the fact that you said that other people would argue is the tip off that if we're all in agreement here, it doesn't really matter, right?
Well, it's true, but I think, yeah. All right.
People come from
So,
Hot Docs will possibly have learned that because if they've gone through trainings that LHI has put on, they often teach this style. So that's why I wouldn't call it out specifically.
Yeah.
And this is where maybe the point about saying why we made the decision is the thing to put down here.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
You know.
So actually, like, this isn't really an example of Hungarian notation, yes, no. We are appending some information about the type, but that would be like bool or TF is the.
Yeah, but in the PDF, yes and no are, I think.
They play
that's why Hungarian notation just like, I wasn't sure what, because I don't feel like we're using Hungarian notation in the PDFs in another way. Like, I don't feel like we're using bool or like, I don't think we're using checkbox or radio or, and like, we're not using any of those. So
I'm not calling out something that we do. The reason why I think it's important to highlight is if we have volunteers who have learned Hot Docs already, they may be doing that because it is something that's taught in classes from LHI. Right. So I have had this conversation with everybody who has started over using Hot Docs.
Oh, wow.
I want to put in our
okay. Yeah, and then that definitely is a big flag. Yeah.
And I think they'd ask the question, like, should we do this? I don't see examples in the DocAssemble code of this happening.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation. I'm not like telling people you can't do this, absolutely don't. But they all want to know why it's not, why we're not. Okay.
So PDF fields, I think, is the different section, and we don't have Hungarian notation in PDF fields if we're sticking with the sticking really tightly to the definition of what we think of as Hungarian fields. I mean, Hungarian notation.
I think we have.
Oh, I see. But for Hot Docs, you do. Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying we don't need an except for PDF fields because we don't do that in PDF fields.
We do for dates.
So.
I actually like that. Anyway, I find it for dates.
So I'm just going to do this this is my suggestion is to remove this because it's not just for PDF fields, it's just for dates. So.
Okay.
Okay. To me, date isn't really Hungarian notation exactly because it is what it is the date of the signature, right? So it is descriptiveness in a way that is relevant to the purpose of the variable. But I see where it can be confused with it, right?
if you read it in natural English, would it still make sense? It
Mm,
does with the
yeah.
date, doesn't really with the other ones.
Yep.
Actually might be worth adding here. Names should generally read close to naturally. That seems like too many hedges.
Okay. So this is slower than I thought it would be, but so everything
all
else is going to
things.
be much slower. I think PDF variable names we can come back to because we really do have we do have a fairly, could you put the link in here to the naming PDF thing, right? Set of guide.
Pushing the T.
For, thank you. For PDF variables. So I'm gonna do file names. So is it all, what the heck is the dash called? Dash between things. I don't
Hyphen?
remember. Huh?
Yeah,
Hyphen
sure.
case?
Hyphen?
N or N.
Oh, with a case?
Or hyphen
Lower
sometimes. Depends
case
on.
with M
Oh,
dashes.
underscore. Underscore.
We're
Or do
doing
you mean dash?
underscores?
You mean hyphen?
Whichever one, just tell me which one it is and we can do the
Hyphens,
name.
I think. I don't, people have a hard time typing M dashes.
Well, M dashes is just the dash. It just is something they can look up, but okay. Lowercase with hyphens.
There's a typographic.
For
So those of
YAML
us who had
files.
to wrestle with the blue book, the N dash is not a hyphen.
Yeah, it's not a hyphen.
I'm sorry.
It's slightly larger. And then there's N dashes.
Oh,
And-
geez.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. For YAML, lowercase with hyphens. Then there's like
PDFs.
PDFs.
See, now I don't know if this is something that goes in, I mean, could this go in like maybe pre-processing where there's PDFs at different stages, right? So you've got like the PDF once it's downloaded, and then you've got the PDF once it's been
There's
labeled. I mean, and then the final PDF, which will be the one that's going to be the template.
so there's the name of the PDF and then there's the name of the PDF variable, right? And that's separate.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the name of the PDF though.
So the name of the PDF document is going to be the name of the form with hyphens, right? The name of the PDF variable, you're not going to have a totally different PDF. Like you're not going to have a different template.
No, but what
for
I'm saying,
template
Michelle, is that
file.
you have different, the PDF is at different, the PDF itself moves through the assembly line, and through the assembly line, it because it gets loaded up onto the Trello cards and stuff.
Yeah, it should always have the same name.
So you don't want names, you don't want the name to be changed.
No, it should
Okay.
always have the same name. Its location in the flow is what will differentiate it from the PDFs previously, right?
Okay, I'll just
Like-
read you that documentation then.
Hang on, let me, because you're right, because the card moves and the card has the PDF. No,
I just
do
remember
we-
you saying that
do
you
we need
came
the
up with
dated
some name
documents?
initially that, and I just wanted you to clarify what you want the thing to be. Do you want it to have different names, or do you want it to just be one name?
What do other people think?
We haven't really revisited that part of the workflow recently. So were the file names helpful at the beginning, do you think, Maeve, when we included annotations about what stage they were in?
They weren't that helpful because people weren't really abiding by them. So I think there probably was a possibility for it to be helpful, but it wasn't to the extent that it wasn't implemented properly. So I think, but what my main question was, is this something that we're talking about now, or are we just talking about the end PDF, the final labeled PDF that's going to be used in DocAssemble? and put on GitHub? Is that, or are we going to be?
Or are they the same thing, right?
No, they're not though, because the one is in the pre-processing stage, and this is in the development stage, is it not?
Yeah.
I'm saying, are their names going to be the same thing, right? Will it just be the same convention for all of them?
It sounds like if we need to make a decision about that, we could decide that they should be consistent throughout, and that will be easier for people to understand. And then the value of having different names and having that name be distinguishing for the stage wasn't there. We didn't end up realizing that value. So
Yeah.
Okay.
for that reason, I would agree. Like, let's keep the name correct in the beginning because it doesn't get confusing. So,
Okay, perfect. So form name lowercase hyphens. And so, okay, we're using hyphens and not underscores. This is the one thing that I was always confused about, is when are we using hyphens, when are we using underscores, when are we using none?
yeah, I don't think we're ever using none.
Oh, so I think in package names, Michelle said we don't use hyphens or underscores there. That's just.
So that's not file names, right? So.
No, I know, but I'm just saying in terms of naming things.
So other names, packages. Packages is because it's not possible to do. I would have a different naming convention if I could.
That is a good question. So, like, should we choose a single standard? Are there reasons for us to not just use underscores for file names too? Because we have no choice but to use them with variable names. It might be easier for people to remember.
Yeah.
Okay,
So just,
we could do.
True.
I think
That's a
that's a good point, Quentin. And then the only other difference is going to be in the packages where it's, as Michelle says, you're not able to have anything else.
Sometimes deviating can like help distinguish, but I think here it's clear when you're talking about a file name. So yeah, and actually another benefit is when you're referencing it inside a YAML file, there might be some places where using a dash would cause a problem. I'm not positive. Spaces definitely can. So it makes it so that you don't have to put it in quotes whenever you're referencing the file name. I'm not sure if that actually is a problem. The one downside to underscores is that they can be hard to read if they are in a Word document and Word is automatically highlighting misspellings. But
yeah, or yeah.
But then I just turn off spell check when I'm working the docx template.
Workaround.
This is a really little convention that might help us for readability. I don't know, or it might not. It could go backwards. I generally write out YAML, Y-A-M-L, because that's the name of the standard. YML is just the name of.
And then I'll do dot YML if it's like, yeah.
PDF works both ways, so there I wouldn't necessarily. This is literally.
Well, I mean, let's be consistent. Then let's be consistent, right?
I would write out YAML, Y-A-M-L, capital Y-A-M-L, write out PDF.
Oh, you're saying the opposite. Okay.
I just would never write out capital Y-M-L, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay. What we've got. So a JS file, multiple exports. In JavaScript, we have different conventions. Do you want this to just be?
Follow JavaScript conventions for JavaScript files, I think.
You know what? They're so mixed at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if we could use our other naming conventions without confusing JavaScript developers, I think that's fine. But if they're like clearly established conventions that are from JavaScript, then we should stick with those.
Sure.
Like definitely, I would say let's use JavaScript coding conventions inside the JavaScript file.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, jumping back and forth, you know, yeah, jumping back and forth is definitely an interesting experience. Class name. So this
I remember.
image files, right, as well.
Yeah, let's keep those
Files.
lowercase with underscores, I think. Keep them snake case.
Yeah. Okay.
And source files too.
Yep. I mean, images are in source files, aren't they? Oh, no, they're in static files.
Static, yeah.
Okay, I would say the only exception is if you're exporting one class. Now I have a question is if you're exporting one function, should the name of the file be the name of the function? But
We're talking about Python files or
JavaScript files or YAML. If for example, you have a YAML file that what you do is you interact with it with only one call, right? Like you only use one variable in it and it does the rest. Do you use the name of that variable?
So there are different conventions in different languages, right? So in Java, for example, one file, one class.
I'm just saying in a file that only has one
Python
thing
does
that
not
is
have that
exported.
concept. They have modules where there's an expectation that there's more than one thing inside each .py Python file.
But there's sometimes when it doesn't make sense to have more, there's not other stuff to put in there, right? Like there's no reason to have, there's nothing in that category or that relates to it. So
there isn't a convention around having class names match the Python file name that I'm aware of. So whether it's one or more, it wouldn't, I don't think it would add clarity to make it match the name of the module or class that's inside the module file. Maybe it would, maybe I just haven't run into that. But yeah, obviously some languages enforce that. It's like C++ didn't have that rule. And I think probably people are borrowing it from Java when they do that. And that was like
in JavaScript,
familiarity with people, you know.
In JavaScript, there are times where we do that too, where it is just useful. I mean, you just do, because you like import star from whatever and it matches the file name or whatever it is. Like, it's just in JavaScript sometimes we do, but that doesn't mean we have to do it here. So
I think unless we have to deviate from our other rule. Now we haven't come up with a naming convention for naming Python module files. So that's an interesting question.
I thought it was just, I mean, I thought that was this, like Python with Python files.
How do you choose the name of the file, the module, when it has multiple things in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's as hard as choosing a variable name, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, variable name. I mean, everything except for PDF is just, this is the variable, right? You're coming up with a good name for a thing. The form always has a name, but everything else, I'm going to put this at the bottom.
And the form might not always have a name that is predefined that's good, but we have at least an idea of what people call it. There might be a few different names for it sometimes, but
okay.
I mean, we've seen that with the generic motion for family law, like that's what Kate calls it, and then it actually does.
What do you do if there are leading digits in the name?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, a lot of forms are named that way. In Massachusetts, people use the numbering form or the maybe make it GL as the beginning. That might be the way to do it. That's what, when we call it 209A, but it's actually Massachusetts General Law, Section 209A.
So
I think
always put
GL, 209A would be
at the beginning?
What do you think
Is
about
it
that?
always? Is
Well,
it,
it's only if the name of the form is referenced to the general laws.
Yeah.
So if you had something like affidavit of energy, it's,
Yeah, we wouldn't say every form needs to, if
So-
the common name of the form is this section of the general laws, then I would say we could just make it acceptable by putting GL at the beginning.
yeah.
But if the common name of the form is something else, like we wouldn't force people to use the section of the statute title or section in the general laws to refer to it if that's not the way people usually refer to the form.
generally don't use the section numbers. I don't know what this is, but to numbers of the law unless they're conventional name of the form.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it.
I'm now just thinking of all the forms I know that, like, in
Are
the
there
green sheet, like I'm like, it's the green sheet fits on a piece of green paper.
So I mean,
It's
should
like
you
the-
put GS in front of green sheet? I don't know, like
I don't think it's going to come
what
off
are
the green
other
sheet.
things like general
won't
law?
run,
Okay, I don't know.
But
Y'all
I
are
was just thinking
crazy.
about all the different ways that forms get named.
Oh,
There are always nicknames in every field, right? So
Yeah.
Mm.
the difference is for some of these people always refer, so like in other states, they might call it, in Washington, they call it DVPO for Domestic Violence Protective Order. And that's the shorthand name. In Massachusetts, for whatever reason, people call it a 209A, which I think helps exactly know
so
besides lawyers.
so can we say do not use an acronym?
I
Or
think
is
that
an acronym okay?
Or you could just say use the common name, whatever that is, right? If the common name's derived from a section title, append
Prepend it.
GL. Yeah, prepend.
And then I would say, unless the name is like totally doesn't convey information. So like in 209A, I might even say we would call it 209A protective order. So part of the name is meaningful. And then part of the name gives people the usual definition of the way that people usually refer to it.
Does this description sum up our, because you're saying things that like I sort of understand, but like I can't really make a is this the general rule that we want to use?
Well, what do you think, David? Does that addendum to the rule make sense?
I
Like
like the common name of the form.
one descriptive term?
Yeah, I like the idea of one descriptive term. I mean, part of me almost wants to say, don't call it 209A or 209A, but that would just like blow people's minds up. So,
All right.
Really long parenthetical now.
so then the question is, well, except the example you just used has leading numbers, so that doesn't follow our own guidelines, right?
I know, I was thinking like we didn't have that.
Maybe the solution there is to prepend with a descriptive. So protective order.
Lowercase,
score,
right? We said all
209A.
lowercase.
Yeah, that's another way we could go, is start with the word that describes it. No, 209A should be uppercase.
But we said all lowercase.
We did say that. Yeah.
See, so Michelle, the problem is that in different sections of conventionally in different section numberings, you have uppercase and lowercase a
Okay,
in
so
statutes.
That is part of the number. So I think it should be capital. And we're not consistent in our project at all. That's actually one of the things I wanted to make standardized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't understand that was a set for when uppercase letters denote something specific. I don't remember what it is you called it, that it was special. So GL is lowercase though?
Well,
The
Hey,
G
we're
is
trying to
capital,
decide
the
if-
L is.
consistency. I think it should be uppercase. And maybe we should make it MGL instead of GL, because GL is also kind of a shorthand.
Right, or do we want to just take it so that you always prepend with a descriptive name? If that's the common name, great. But if there is a section name that you put, you append that to the end. So it'd be
Okay.
protective order 209A.
Well, so,
Mhm.
and I'm going to make this more complicated, I'm sorry, but when they're listed alphabetically, it's really useful when they all start with 2 and 9. Like,
Well,
so,
so one
but-
thing is the file.
but part of the problem was that that was in MA Virtual Courts. And so
Yeah.
I think if it had been in its own repository project to start with, then we wouldn't have had as much trouble with that. So maybe that's not an issue.
And we actually might not have even wanted to use the name of the form in the package, right? For the YAML file name.
That's
If
true.
it's already the name of the repository, it's maybe redundant. I haven't been following that convention, other like single page interviews, single file interviews where the form name gives the description of the file. I'm not, so like the affidavit of care and custody, the name that I chose for the YAML file. Actually, that's not a good example because I think I used standalone as the name because it was also a file that's included somewhere else. It should say the subsection of the package that it represents, essentially, I think, right? If you have functional file names, you say what part of this overall package does this YAML file represent? You don't have to include the package title again. But for the PDFs, you certainly would. The reason why I'm going down this road, I'm sorry, this is probably distracting for me to think out loud.
No, that's okay. I
could
mean,
use numbers for
We've all
PDF.
been doing it.
if this is
But-
something, I think PDF should have its own section. Okay, so we're gonna do just a different section for PDFs. PDFs.
So do PDFs, we let them start with numbers because that's a valid file name. But then the problem is the wizard uses that as the draft name of the file, of the YAML file, so. And then it becomes mangled. So I think having a PDF name that can be turned into a variable name is a good idea,
Okay.
just because of the way that defaults are really powerful and we generate a file that uses that
Yeah.
throughout the file for variable names. So we want it to match so people don't get confused by what's what.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna let you all write this part because I'm confused about what the important significant features are. Sorry, I don't mean to. If you're expecting me to write, I'm gonna like hands off for now to let that be.
I've just noticed the time, Quentin. I think you said you wanted to do 10 minutes of prep before your 11:30 meeting.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I should go. Oh, which the right time? 11:25 or 11:23?
I'm on 25.
25 is what I have.
Okay,
Me too.
my computer clock is off.
Oh, you're not synced up?
I'm not sure why.
The
Oh.
cloud. So
So
we'll
weird.
work on this for a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Yep. And we can change it afterwards too. So
I'm
we
kind
need,
of
we
leaning
need
towards what you
approximately
said that
5
day.
or 6 more meetings like this.
We might be able to do some independent writing
Yeah.
down of ideas.
Yeah,
Okay.
this might be a divide and conquer deal.
Okay.
But you were saying, Quentin, you were leaning towards,
Putting the
Okay.
descriptive word first when there's a number in the name of the form. I think that makes sense. It's the simplest. You're not adding a new meaningless thing just to make it fit the file convention. I don't know. I've never heard anyone refer to it as a GL 209A,
no.
but people have said protective order. Okay.
All right, you go do your,
I'll do my thing. I think that's probably the convention we should choose, is have it start with the name. What would be the 258E? Would that still be protective order, 258E?
or restraining.
So they're all restraining orders. Restraining
All
orders
restraining orders.
general because there's so many things that we'll call restraining orders.
Yeah,
Have very different definite meanings of restraining.
yeah. I don't know what people would.
Any equitable relief, right, is going to be a restraining order.
Yeah, it's always just 250-80 is what I.
Caroline might know a common name for it.
Yeah, but the truth is, I think we get to some point where what we're trying to do there is we're trying to append a common name that's interpretable to someone who doesn't understand the shorthand. So it might not necessarily be the same name that someone who understands the shorthand would use.
That's true.
The main thing is that it's not confusing to the person who sees 250-80. Like that would, you know, that still could be additional. You got to go, Quentin. Don't.
I do, yeah. Okay, and I fixed my clock. I just had it off. So, all right, I'll talk to you all later.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Let me pull up my copy of. Here. I will take on the.
So a name that's not
Lawyer.
confusing to lawyers reading it, to coders reading it, to who?
So the point is, if
Someone
it's
looking
the
at
numbers,
the PDF.
yeah, the lawyers always, they're going to know the numbers if that's the common name, right? We're only appending the numbers if the numbers themselves are a common name. I think this gives me. the
To
answer.
lawyers, then lawyers.
Well, so the idea is that the name should not be confusing to either lawyers or lay people. The point is that there might be different parts to the name to arrive at that understanding.
Well, as a
Right.
coder, all I need to know is the PDF name, and then like I can look in the templates of the PDFs. So the name's going to be the name isn't going to tell me much as a layperson, right?
I think the main thing is that also the other, because these PDFs end up eventually being attached, right? Does that
but we
name
can
come
change
from
their-
this? It
that
changes.
we can give them other names. We can give them other names afterwards. If we want, we can make a different convention for naming, or we can handle the convention here. Just like there's a lot more refining that happens near the end, and the names could change there, so we could push
Yeah.
that off till
I
the
like
end
the
if we
idea.
want
I
to.
mean, one of our guiding principles does seem to have shown up in doing this, is that we like to try to keep the name similar throughout the pipeline if possible.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the main person you're trying not to confuse at this stage, I suppose, is the attorney. And it's not so much that it's, and to be clear, the type of confusion we're trying to avoid is not renaming it to something that isn't what they call it. So that's why we, but that's to some extent that's covered by the instruction to use the common name. So it's maybe the common name, common usage by lawyers. Maybe that's what we mean by common name.
I have to jump off, so this recording is going to end. I'll upload it as part 1 of the style guide thing, and then hopefully either David or Michelle, you could just record the second part.
Yeah, or we might not have much longer in us, so.
Okay. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Later, bye, Maeve.
Bye.